Have you been thinking about a car fridge, but you're just not quite convinced they'll really save you money in the long run? There has been a surge in portable fridges over the past few years, and now everyone from van lifers to overlanders to regular Joe campers are drooling over them. But I've just had this lingering feeling that the math may not pan out in the fridge's favor, and perhaps you're just trading one inconvenience for another, the need to constantly supply ice versus constantly supplying power. Now, I don't expect to resolve this debate here, but I do believe we can concretely test and address the true cost of 12-volt fridges versus coolers according to math.
Gear up and get outside.
When comparing coolers and portable fridges, there is no real apples to apples comparison. So I'm comparing the one fridge I have to two different coolers. One that's similar in build quality and one that's similar in price. The fridge is the Bodega T36 dual zone car fridge. It has a list price of $379.99, but you can often find it at a discount. Bodega sent this to me for free to test. This Coleman 316 series wheeled cooler is a budget-friendly model with a lower end fit and finish that's very similar to the Bodega fridge in its build quality. It has a list price of $75, but you can usually find it for around 60 bucks. At $359.99, this Grizzly 60-quart rotomolded cooler is similar in price to the Bodega fridge, but it's a premium cooler, whereas the Bodega is a budget car fridge. The Grizzly is known for its quality, ruggedness, and ability to retain ice longer than a traditional cooler. The first thing I wanted to do to compare these three cold boxes was a real-world test, so I could objectively say how they perform, how much ice the coolers use, and how much electricity the car fridge uses in similar conditions. I did this test over the course of an entire week, and I logged exactly how much ice the coolers burned through, how much it cost when I had to buy more, and how much electricity the fridge consumed by using an electricity consumption meter that I plugged the fridge into. Here's how the test went and what I observed from it. So these coolers and the electric fridge have been pre-cooling for almost 24 hours. I added 21 pounds of ice, or 3 bags of ice, to each of the coolers. And then I added the same grocery items to each. Now, even the food is all pre-chilled. It came straight from the refrigerator here, except for the drinks. I didn't have the room in my fridge to pre-chill those. This is a 36 liter, about the same in quarts, portable fridge. This is a 60-quart cooler. This one is 62 quarts. Each of these coolers and or fridges have the exact same amount of food, starting in the exact same state, including some frozen lunch meat, some bacon, some eggs, some juice, some milk, things that you would take on a camp out. Now that they're all here, they are going to stay here for 1 week. I'm going to make sure I don't waste any food, so I will add ice as needed to the coolers, and I will keep an eye on that portable fridge to make sure it's at a food-safe temperature. All right, it's been about 24 hours since I put all the food in here and the fresh ice in the coolers. But already after one day, I noticed I needed to put some more ice in the coolers, so I did so today. I put another 10-pound bag, actually 2 10-pound bags of ice in this cheaper Coleman cooler because it was quite a bit lower. And I put a 1 10-pound bag of ice in the Grizzly. That's reading out at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. However, look at this. This is the current temperature inside there on the Bluetooth thermometer, which is 48.1 degrees Fahrenheit. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem cold enough. Maybe it's because it's a cheap model and doesn't have a ton of insulation in that lid, and so it's significantly warmer up high than it is down low. But most of all, I want to make sure that food is at a food-safe temperature. So here is the big change that I just implemented today, and that is this meat thermometer. So there are 3 probes connected to this, and what I did is I put a probe in each of those juice bottles. My plan now is just to leave that in there for the whole experiment, and then I'm going to check it each day. So at present, the number 1 thermometer, which is in the Coleman, is 37 degrees. The number 2 thermometer is at 36 degrees. That's here in the Grizzly cooler. And then the juice in the Bodega is at 43 degrees. So that also is concerning because theirs says 43, and again, this says 32. Huh. It doesn't feel right, but I'm going to go ahead and just decrease this temperature even farther. And I'm just going to see if that makes a difference. As you can see, we are now at 0.6 kilowatt hours of power consumed by this Bodega since I began pre-cooling. I also took a look at how our thermometer inside the garage is doing, and I can report that the highs in here during the day are in the high 80s. The lows at night were in the mid 70s. After day 2, things were dialed in pretty well, and then it was just a waiting game. I opened the cooler several times for days, sometimes grabbing a soda or something from them, but if I opened one, I always opened all 3 of them. I was taking note of the amount of ice left in the coolers and how much water there was so that I could add more ice if I needed to. That is the Coleman cooler juice That is the Grizzly cooler juice. That is the fridge juice at 39. But as you notice, it's at 28, so I'm gonna bring that all the way down to 25. Once I managed to get that fridge to a temperature that would keep food and drinks adequately cold but not frozen, I was content that both coolers and the fridge were keeping food at safe temperatures. But it wasn't long before those ice chests needed more ice. Okay, it is actually day 6, so it has been 5 complete days since I started this whole shindig. And if you look here, here are the temperatures of the juices inside. That's actually on the bodega fridge right now. 36 degrees. Also note, this is just a comment on this particular fridge. I don't think it's a problem with all fridges, but I set that down to 25 in order to get it to 36. So I don't think that thermostat is very accurate at all, and nothing in there is frozen. But the bigger issue today is that if I look at the other thermometers, so here's that Coleman. Look at that, 50 degrees in that juice. Whoops. And same with the Grizzly. Here we go, let's look in the Coleman. That is all water, my friends. Our ice is gone. And if we look here in the Grizzly, surprisingly, we're seeing the same thing. Now, I did look at the temperature data from the Bluetooth thermometers in there, and the Grizzly did stay colder longer than the Coleman, and the water inside both of these is still quite cold. I'm pretty confident none of my food is spoiled because it's only been like this for a matter of hours. I should have got more ice for these yesterday, but it was Sunday, we had family over, I didn't want to go to the gas station and do it, so I just let it be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull these coolers out of the garage real quick. I'm gonna drain the water out of them, putting that water on some dry spots in my lawn. No need to let it go totally to waste. If you watched a video I did a while back about whether or not you should drain your cooler, you might be thinking, well, Chase, you said not to drain your cooler. What I really concluded from that experiment was actually that if you can and you want to prolong the coldest temperatures possible in your cooler, it is best to drain it and replace that volume with new ice. What's not good is to drain all your water and only have a little tiny bit of ice left, because then you have more air. Air heats up faster and you're just gonna accelerate the spoiling of your food. So if all you've got is cold water, then leave the cold water in there. That probe is back in the juice. Okay, we've got 28 pounds of ice in each of these coolers, new fresh ice. Thermometer's back in the juice. I'm gonna shut them up and then we're gonna see what happens for the rest of the time. 2.2 kilowatt hours has been consumed on this portable fridge since this began. So that was 1 day of pre-chilling and essentially 5 full days of keeping food cold. So that makes what, just a little more than 300 watt hours per day. So might give you an idea of where you need to be thinking about sizing a power station if you elect to go the fridge route. With fresh ice, the coolers were ready to see the rest of the week through. The hassle of finding, buying, draining, and adding ice is one of the main reasons car fridge fans love to hate on ice chests. And they have a point. 6 days after I first added food, the ice situation stabilized. Okay folks, we have reached a full week with this cooler fridge test. Let's take a look and see what they look like inside. Starting with the Coleman, here we are. Still got some ice in it, but plenty of water. In fact, if I were gonna keep going, I would be putting more ice in it today for sure. Probably 1, maybe even 2 more bags. If we open up, let's look at this rotomolded Grizzly. This one's in better shape for sure. Still plenty of water in there, but quite a bit more ice. Finally, we got our fridge, this bodega fridge. Of course, it looks the same as always. Still says 25 degrees, but I promise you it is not. It's in the mid-30s at best. And after a full week, plus a day of pre-chilling, we are at 3.1 kilowatt hours of power consumed. So as you might expect with the ice chest, you're gonna be adding a lot more ice throughout the week, whereas with the fridge, you're not necessarily having to do that. But there's one little twist that you could do with an ice chest that might be a compromise between the two. Now this was an idea by a viewer a while back, so I can't take full credit for it, but I thought it was a pretty clever idea and maybe a good compromise between using a classic cooler, but solving the problem of running out of ice mid-trip and having to go into town to get more. A portable ice maker that can run off an outlet or even a portable power station may just supply enough ice to be able to resupply your ice chest without constantly consuming power. This one cost me 60 bucks and it works like a dandy. Let's see, this made it in less than an hour and we're at about, well, almost 1 pound of ice. If I would have got it a little earlier, it probably would have been more than that. So I take that and imagine a scenario where you make your own ice and you just keep this little thing going with the power station, which you might have already if you're gonna do a fridge, but you just try to keep this thing going, maybe not consume as much power as you would with a fridge, and you wouldn't have to have it turned on all the time, just enough to keep that cooler topped off with ice. What do you think? Do you think that's a viable solution? All right, let's do the math and break down the numbers from this experiment so we can sort out the true costs of using an ice chest versus a portable fridge. Here's a temperature graph of the coolers and the fridge. For reference, the average daily low temperature in the garage was 74 degrees and the average daily high was 89 over the course of the test. It took a couple days for all the units to get cool and dialed in. But the fridge then maintained a very consistent temperature while there's a lot more variability in temperatures in the coolers. As the outside temperature increased and decreased throughout the day and night, so did the internal temperatures of the coolers. Feel free to pause your screen at any time if you want to geek out on this data. When you look at the daily juice temperatures, you see a similar pattern. During the test, the Coleman cooler used 76 pounds of ice and the Grizzly used 66 pounds for a total of 142 pounds of ice consumed. At the end, the Coleman was almost out and the Grizzly had quite a bit more ice left, so it's clear that the Grizzly would consume less ice in the long run. However, you can still safely estimate that this Coleman cooler may consume approximately 11 7-pound bags of ice for 1 week of camping. The Grizzly, or an equivalent heavy-duty roto-molded cooler, may consume up to 10 bags of ice per week. I purchased a total of 19 bags of ice, mostly 7 pounds each and some 10-pound bags, from 4 different vendors including Walmart and 3 different gas stations. So this is pretty representative of where most people buy their ice. The price of a bag ranged from $2.33 to $3.49 each. Pro tip, had I gone to Costco, I could have gotten 20-pound bags for $2.79 each, less than half the average cost of everywhere else. The average cost of ice based on what I paid was 38 cents per pound. Now let's look at electricity costs for this fridge. I was using AC power as I had it plugged into my electricity consumption meter, which was plugged into a regular outlet in my garage. Over the course of the 8-day test, 1 day of pre-chilling and 1 week with contents, the Bodega fridge consumed 3.1 kilowatt hours of electric power, or an average of about 400 watt hours per day. Electricity prices can vary a lot depending on where you live. I looked it up on the U.S. Energy Information Administration's website. The national average price per kilowatt hour of electricity is 16 cents. But I'm in Idaho, where we have below average electricity prices, thank goodness, compared to the rest of the nation. So in this test, I was paying about 12 cents per kilowatt hour. That means I only paid 37 cents to run that fridge for a week. The national average consumer would pay around 50 cents. And even if you live in Hawaii or the Northeast, where energy prices are the highest, you would have only paid around 90 cents. That seemed silly cheap to me. If you think I've got something wrong, let me know in the comments, because it does seem too good to be true. So, for less than $1, you can keep your food and drinks cold for a whole week with a 12-volt fridge? Well, not so fast. An ice chest is inherently portable, and it's pre-analog, so there's no electronics at all. Just add ice, put in truck, and you're good to go. But that's not the case with a portable fridge. You have to constantly supply power to it in order for it to stay cold. And this is my big problem with portable fridges. While the total amount of energy they consume is somewhat nominal or negligible compared to our electricity consumption at home, you have to have an entire electrical supply system in your vehicle or at camp in order to achieve the same food chilling effect you get from an ice chest. And these portable power supply systems are not usually very cheap. Let me give you a few examples. Starting with a good but inexpensive option, you have the Bouge Flash 300. This power station comes in at a list price of $400. If the average 7-pound bag of ice costs $2.67, as it did for me in this test, that's the equivalent of 150 bags of ice. I'm doing this so we can put the true cost of each of these options in perspective one with another. But this little Bouge power station only has a max capacity of 268 watt hours, which won't even power my little Bodega fridge for 1 full day. So let's look at an upgraded power station. The Blue Eddy AC70 is a bestseller from a reputable power station manufacturer. It has a list price of $699, which, in the olden days that many of us still live in, could buy you a whopping 262 bags of ice. With 768 watt hours of capacity, it should power that little fridge for nearly 2 days. That's better, but still a pretty short campout. Of course, the exact calculations here could be very different depending on the fridge you have, ice prices, and a bunch of other stuff. But these were my real costs, so that's what we're rolling with today. So let's take a look at an award-winning power station that lots of the big tech reviewers like, the Jackery Explorer 2000 Plus. This Jackery comes in at a cool $2,199, which could buy 824 bags of ice. That's 3 tons of ice, enough to conduct at least 4 of my massive 40 cooler ice challenges. At least it has a lot of capacity at 2,043 watt hours, which if your fridge is the only thing you use it for, which it almost certainly won't be, then you could have cold drinks for up to 5 whole days in fair weather. Just hope it doesn't get too hot and requires twice as much power to keep that fridge cold when it's sitting in your car or in the sun. But of course, if you're gonna get a power station and there's no guarantee it will keep your fridge running for the whole trip anyway, and you wanna run your Starlink and your outdoor movie projector, then you're probably gonna wanna get a portable solar panel charger too, right? Excellent. Well, let's look at the Jackery Solar Saga 100 watt portable solar charger. It sells for $299 or 112 bags of ice. I don't even think 100 watts is sufficient to keep your power station charged in order to keep your fridge running, let alone everything else. However, if all goes well, this Jackery certainly could be a decent companion to any one of the aforementioned power stations. But you're probably really gonna want a 200 watt array, and that's gonna cost twice as much. Even then, you better hope for sun so the panels can output enough power to charge your battery to power your fridge. But not too much sun, because that will make your fridge have to work harder and consume more energy. Not to mention your power station will run less efficiently or even shut down from overheating, so your food just warms up anyway. And hopefully that lithium battery power station won't blow up like you've seen on TV. Enough being a negative Nancy, let's get back to the costs. Here is a simple table of consumption and costs from my little test. Obviously, the coolers in the fridge are one-time purchases, whereas the ice or energy are variable and ongoing costs. Except, for a car fridge to truly be portable, you actually have to build in some fixed cost up front for your power supply system. From then on, you have virtually no variable costs like you do with ice. While you might argue that you can charge it in your car, that's great for when you're driving, but unless you run your car 24/7, which is a ridiculous thing to do, not only for noise in the environment, but also for cost and wear and tear on your vehicle, you still need a power station or a generator at a minimum to run that fridge when at camp. Now here's the real humdinger. Based on the results of my test and math, this table reveals how long you could potentially supply a cooler with ice for the same cost as a complete portable fridge and power supply system, assuming the Bodega T36, the Bluetti AC70, and the Jackery 100 watt solar panel charger. And if we're being honest, this is a low tier car fridge and maybe a mid-tier power supply system at best. You could easily spend double or triple that much for a better setup. Whereas $400 ought to buy you one of the finest ice chests in all the land. After subtracting the initial purchase price of either cooler from the total cost of the 12-volt fridge and power supply system, one ought to be able to still purchase 38 weeks worth of ice for the Grizzly cooler and up to 44 weeks worth for the Coleman. If we assume one will camp for 4 weeks per year, which in reality is probably more than average, that's a cool 10 years worth of ice for the Grizzly, or as much as 11 for the Coleman. Wow.
Wow.
But even if we're being conservative and cut those numbers in half to account for ice price inflation, hot weather, and inefficiencies, you still get 5 years of coolers with ice for the price of one mediocre car fridge. Am I missing something? Seriously, you do your math and let me know where I'm wrong in the comments. Besides, do you think this car fridge and that power supply system and lithium battery will last longer than 5 years? That would be pretty impressive if the compressor in this fridge lasts that long with that much use. I'm skeptical. I'm sure the warranty won't last more than a year or two on any of these electronic devices, not to mention the fact that they'll probably be outdated and obsolete within a few years of when you buy it. A cooler though? They basically never expire. I still have one of my granddad's that's 40 years old and functional. And this Grizzly cooler has a lifetime warranty. I don't think you can say that for a car fridge. Now I get it, there are a lot of reasons people might opt for a car fridge versus an ice chest, or vice versa. All kinds of pros, cons, and expert pro tips that you can do with either one of these options that can make them more efficient or last longer. You do you, there's lots of different use cases that make sense for one or the other. This video is not about which option is best, it's not even about these specific coolers and fridges I tested. It's just about the costs involved when you go one way or the other. And while that can vary as well, for example, I'd expect a high-end ARB fridge to outperform this cheap little Bodega, this at least gives you a baseline. You can assume that if you upgrade or downgrade, the relative differences with products from the same price and quality class ought to be pretty similar to what we saw here. If you enjoyed this test, subscribe to the channel for more like this. And subscribe to our email list where I often send out even more data and head-scratching anecdotes. Link below. Now go watch this test on whether or not you should drain your cooler. What test should I do next?